Have you thrown the top of your pattern off grain by creating more room for a prominent behind? Let's take a look. I've talked about working with the center balance line and adjusting it if it gets too close to the center back seam. And I want to share something that occurred to me this week when I was helping one of my members in my Facebook group. The thing about pants is that you have to really think about your pattern, the changes you make, and how they affect the total outcome. So what that requires first is a 3D view, or a 365-degree look at your shape and your pattern pieces. So I'm going to put links to why a center balance line is helpful in pants fitting, and knowing how far it is from the center back is important. I'm putting a link to those two videos in the description below, but I just want to remind everybody what I'm talking about here. So I have my back leg, okay, and the way I establish my center balance line is to find the middle of the leg from the knee down to the hem, and then continue straight up. So I'm pretending this is my knee and this is my hem. These are Bermuda shorts, I guess. And you're going to go straight up from there, okay? And what we're looking at now is how far the balance line is from your center back seam. Now remember, on a center back seam, you also have a seam allowance that's not visible on your paper pattern. So if I were to draw in the top of the seam allowance, you can see the distance between here and here is not very great, but it is about an inch, and that seems to be an acceptable amount at a minimum for people who don't have really curvy side seams or really prominent behind. So what I'm trying to say here is be body aware, look in the mirror. You can have a prominent behind that needs more angle or more inside room to sit in. Remember, this area here, and I'm just going to darken it in, this is like a chair. Okay, this is the seat of the chair. And then if I use a different color here, this is the back of the chair. Okay, so when you sit down in your pants, you need to have enough room inside to sit down in. And sometimes when you're trying to achieve that, you may actually end up throwing the top of the pattern off grain. And what ends up happening then is you end up getting wrinkles on your back leg that you don't know what to do with. So what I want to show here is, if I were to just, let's say, move the angle of my back crotch out a little bit more, just a ½ an inch. So now let's pretend it's right where the seam allowance is. That would put the seam allowance almost directly next to the center balance line at the top of the waistline. And if you do that, and then you end up with wrinkles on your back leg, that's going to tell you that you're too close. So what I want to do is share with you here. Let's say I needed to give myself a little bit more of an angle. So I'm going to go ahead and do this with my orange. Okay, you can see this whole orange area. I'm going to color it in. Okay, that is now contributing to the inside space. We've also removed fabric from the center back. Now, if you have a loose, if your muslin is loose across the back, sometimes you can do that to fit it and make a bigger shape for your behind down here. But if you needed that room, after you do that, you could add it back in over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and add it back in over here, and I'm color coordinating this to make it easy for you to see. Okay, so what we've done is we've added the extra back in on the side. So we plussed over here and we minused over here in terms of fabric wrapping around your body. We added inside space to sit down. So you can almost lean back in the chair, because now we can lean back to here versus here. But now, if I were to draw that seam allowance back in, you can see it's almost right next to the top of the center balance line. So here's another way that you can deal with this, meaning if you need that space, but now you have thrown off your pattern, here is an easy way to rebalance the pattern. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a completely different color. So we have 3 different colors. I'm going to use my silver here. I'm going to go ahead and draw a vertical line that's parallel to my center balance line in the area that I have. So let's say, the orange is now not part of the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead, just to make it really clear, I'm going to just draw the top edge of the straight edge of the pattern with this. Okay, so this is now gone off the pattern, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to take a ruler, draw yourself a vertical line in the space you have left between the center balance line and the center back seam, and you're going to extend that a couple inches below the crotch level. So I'm going to go down a little bit farther. We'll go to here, and then I'm going to draw a horizontal line to the inseam like this. So what I've done is I've created an L-shaped bracket. What I'm going to do is create a pivot over here at the inseam. So I'm going to turn this pattern upside down. I am going to slash, and I'm going to slash 2, but not through my inseam, to create a pivot. So you can see what this allows me to do is pivot this whole section of the pattern that I made more sitting room. I can tilt it to put more distance between my center back edge and my balance line, and that will help balance the top of the pattern without taking away the angle of the center back seam that we just created. So just very simply, I'm just going to grab a scrap of paper here. Okay, so I'm just going to put this paper under here like this. Okay, and I mean, you can tape down this side right here, okay, and then you can measure out how much you need to push that away to give yourself the room you need. Okay, so let's say I'm going to put back what we took out. Okay, I'm not changing the inside space, I'm just giving back the room that I took away between the center balance line and the edge of the pattern here. So if I tape this, and then if I reestablish the top of my pattern by just reconnecting both the original top and the original side seam edges, you can see now we have added all of this fabric to the left side of the grain line, and you can see now I have distance again. Okay, so I have space between the center back seam and my center balance line, which is right here. I really like this adjustment because it doesn't really change anything else. A lot of times when you do an adjustment, you end up having to put something back. For example, when I make this more angled, I have to put it back over here. Here, the only thing this does is create a little bit of a truing up issue along the waistline, and really all you're going to do here is reconnect the side seam and the center back edge, and it's giving you this little sliver of extra height here, which if you don't end up needing that, you can just cut it back off. but we are not changing the length of the center back seam, and we are not changing how much inside room we have. We're just sort of tipping the pattern back and putting it back on grain so you don't get wrinkles on your back leg. So one more thing before I finish here. I'm just going to cut this, I'm going to add the front leg here. And I'm just going to put it together with the back leg like this, okay? And I'm working on my magnetic cutting mat so I can just very easily use my sew tights to hold it into position for me. I'm just going to make that match like that. All right, so another time that this can come in handy is if you're trying to scoop and change the shape of your crotch. Sometimes doing that also can cause the top to get too close to the balance line. So I just wanted to explain that anytime you change the crotch shape, it's a good idea to put your inseams together, make sure you have a nice transition front to back. And if I were going to continue this seam allowance, so let's say the seam allowance is here now, I'm just gonna continue it right along here. Okay. Because that would be the stitching line on my pants. I'm just going to draw a solid line over here so you can see which is which. So the solid line, okay, that's the stitching line. You know, if I needed to scoop in, remember I like to start scooping up near the straight part so I maintain the depth of the pattern. So again, if you're scooping and you're taking out fabric here to create more inside space, this L-shape adjustment might also come in handy. So there's a few different situations where I might use this to balance the top of the pattern after making other adjustments. So I just thought this was a really cool little fit tip to share with you. If you have any questions or comments, please post those below and I will help you. If you're enjoying my content, consider liking and subscribing to my channel because it helps me grow. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day.